Hi guys, Jason the Lazy Heretic here, day 11 of our Advent Devotional. So we hit the double digits, +1, we're doing really well. And I've only missed a few days, so we're going to get 11 days for 11 days of Advent, or 11 devotionals. So hope you're enjoying them. Don't forget to share them around if you want, subscribe, leave a comment. Very happy to interact with you guys and see what you think. And we're talking about peace. This is the second of our topics of Advent, and looking at this idea of peace. And we read the story yesterday of Mary and her visitation to her cousin Elizabeth, and John the Baptist kind of being all excited about his cousin Jesus coming to visit him, and the Magnificat, that wonderful poem that Mary, or song that Mary sings in response to Elizabeth's question of what has happened to her, that the mother of her Lord would visit her. And so we're talking about peace, and we just talked about how it wasn't a very peaceful time for Mary, and then we kind of talked about what is peace. And I think if we look around the world today, there's actually not a lot of peace in the world where we are at anyway. I mean, if you think about it, currently in the world there are 17 armed conflicts going on, but there's more than 17 armed conflicts going on, but there are 17 armed conflicts going on currently that have had over 1,000 fatalities in the last 12 months. And there's about 4 of them that have had over 100,000 fatalities in the last 12 months. And some of those conflicts have been going on since the 60s and the 70s. So there's this long history of conflict and armed conflict between nations, between people groups, wars, civil wars, and that sort of thing. So not a very peaceful time in the world, even though it's supposed to be the season of peace and joy and love and hope. And we kind of get this idea that peace for people in the world today, as we look around, is really the opposite of war. And as I said yesterday, I think that's quite a shallow definition of what peace is. I think peace is far more than that when you look at it in the kingdom perspective, from the perspective of the scriptures. And I just want to kind of highlight why I think that for the people around us, peace is essentially just not war. It's the opposite of war. And you get this idea because when you think of peace, and when you think of the angels announcing to the shepherds peace on earth, you get this idea that the first thing that springs to mind is like the end of all wars, the end of war, the end of armed conflict, the end of fights between nations. You kind of get this idea, and I don't know how many of you know this, but there was actually a Christmas Day truce in World War I back in 1914, so 103 years ago. On Christmas Day in 1914, the Germans and the Allies walked out of their trenches into no man's land, shared Christmas Day together. They played sport with each other, and they just had a great time. And that was the end of the fighting for that day. Of course, the next day they were back at it again, and it never happened really again for the rest of the war because of just the way that the fighting developed. But there's that moment that you kind of go, that's what we think peace is. That kind of, let's just put our guns down and let's not fight, let's not shoot each other. And even if we really want to on the inside, we kind of just go, no, we're just going to play it cool, and we're not going to do it, right? And that's kind of the idea that you get, or the Nobel Peace Prize is given to the person who is promoted, and I've got the quote here. Where is it? Going to find it. It says, to the person who has done the most or best work for fraternity between nations, so the brotherhood of nations, for the abolition or reduction of standing armies. So again, you get this war theme coming through, and the holding and promotion of peace congresses, just the absence of fighting, just the idea of this end of fighting. And it's interesting, just as an aside, that Alfred Nobel, who was the patron of that prize, actually invented dynamite, among other weapons of war. But I think we think of peace as not war, mostly. That's what people think of when they tend to think of it. But if we're going to go to think about the opposite of peace, actually, in biblical terms, the idea is, the opposite of peace is not war, but it's chaos. And that's really interesting, because I think if you go in the Bible, the opposite of peace is chaos. It really opens up and reframes the whole meaning of the word peace. And so I want you guys to think on that for the rest of the day, and just go, what does it mean that for us, in terms of scriptural understanding of it, the opposite of peace is not war, but chaos? How does that reframe your understanding of what peace is? So think on that for the day, and we'll dig a bit more into that tomorrow. But it's been good to spend this time with you. God bless you, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care. Bye.